So a special welcome to those people who are watching this on video. Today, my talk is on seeing in the dark, how we can get through times of uncertainty when the end is not clear. Yesterday was the 20th anniversary of 9/11. For most of us, that day was a shock. My parents' and grandparents' generations had Pearl Harbor, and my generation and my children's generation have 9/11. Even little things changed. Bill and I lived then on the approach path to Dulles Airport. The silence for a few days after 9/11, when there were no planes in the air except an occasional military plane, just that silence felt really ominous. And that silence oddly reminded me of what it felt like with the sound of constant helicopters in the air in another crisis moment in US history that I lived through. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, my family lived near an Air Force Reserve base, and suddenly there were helicopters overhead. It seemed like constantly for a few days. Silence or sound, both unexpected. And the same gut feeling of foreboding, uncertain what would come next. A mind full of possibilities, and many of those possibilities pretty terrible. And now we're living in the second year of a dangerous pandemic. More than 4.5 million people have died worldwide. Every day since March 2020, more than 3,000 people in the world have died. It's like a 9/11 every day. It isn't the 70 to 80 million who died in World War II, but still as many or more than in many major wars. And now with the Delta variant and resistance to public health advice by many, more uncertainty about where this all is headed. Well, this week at RYSEC, we received a request at the Society to host a memorial service in our meeting house. It is more than a year now since I was first asked to officiate at my first memorial service during the pandemic. At that time, the infection and death rates in this area were a whole lot higher than they are now. I felt so uncertain about what could go wrong, and still uncertain about exactly what we needed to do to be fully caring of each other with that service. I also discovered that on a damp day outside in spring in New York City suburbs, wearing even a well-fitted mask designed for speakers and singers, my glasses completely fogged up. We walked to the graveside for the service through a somewhat muddy cemetery, and I had to rely on my husband sometimes to guide me because I literally could see nothing. And I could not read any of my notes. Luckily, I always have them in large type, so I was able to take off my glasses and speak without the glasses on. And now today, even with the surge in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths recently due to the Delta variant, I felt a lot more confident when we got this call about what RYSEC needs to do and needs to ask of the participants for a memorial service. Some level of uncertainty was gone, even while acknowledging that there is no real certainty. Now, back in May and June, and you might remember a platform on RYSEC emerging in June, I fully expected that by today, I'd be speaking to you from the meeting house, and that we'd be able to have maybe 20, maybe even 30 people in the building, with the rest of people participating via Zoom. We had developed some fairly detailed plans. Being a smallish group, these weren't as detailed as were some of the plans for our larger ethical societies, but they were plans. I even ordered wristbands that we could wear on Sundays starting this month. Green for it's okay to hug me and shake my hand, yellow for we can talk up close but no touching, please, and the default of please keep your distance and let me keep mine for anyone not wearing one, because we knew that different people would have different comfort levels. Then the Delta variant came knocking on our door. From a medium to low risk of holding gatherings, our area went to high, and for about a week, even to very high risk again. Not severe, as is true of some of our ethical society locations right now, but it is a high risk right now. And I will say those wristbands were lost in shipping, and I have not yet had the heart to reorder. Oh, and the building, while we've all been gone this summer, has undergone a bit of renovation that you'll see when you get back there. But the schedule for that changed as one of the projects became much more complicated than expected. I think it turned out great, but it still messed with our schedule. And we had thought that our space sharers would be celebrating the Jewish High Holy Days at the building. Congregation Tehillah, after making many plans about how to reopen early in September for those holy days, also shifted back to Zoom again, at least until October. It became clearer and clearer during July that our plans were not going to be implemented in the way we thought. About the 1st of August, after I'd spent some parts of July feeling pretty disturbed and anxious, I had the inspiration, and maybe some of you came to that insight earlier than me, that we just had to take a whole different approach to planning. Yes, we still have to get ready for a future of some, then many, being present for our Sunday meetings in the building. But it is as if we were sitting in the dark, not being able to see details well enough to know what dates we might reopen and what might be safe when. And my insight was, okay, Joan, this is just the new normal. That's the insight. We will be sitting in the dark, and we need to adjust our eyesight to that different condition. We have to be much more flexible about timing. When public health advisories say that we are no longer at high risk in our area or worse, we can move forward on gradually adding capacity for in-person attendance. And we are going to try to keep a Zoom component as long as there are people interested. And there are a lot of signals that it's likely some will permanently move to that kind of participation. I think here of a friend who was fully vaccinated, but due to an immune deficiency, still has no antibodies to fight off a coronavirus attack. And I also think of people who are traveling and might want to still participate with their home community without being there in person. The success of our day camp, where kids and staff were tested just before camp began and masks were worn indoors, is really heartening, both for itself and its value for the kids and parents, but also as a harbinger of what the rest of us will likely be able to do very soon. We can accept that we need to plan for what will happen, and that hanging loose about when and how quickly we can implement the plan, and even how we might have to change the plan. We have to acknowledge that that's the way it is. We have to acknowledge that it is uncertain. Accepting the uncertainty as well as preparing for possibilities just happens to fit into the theme for this month that we decided on way back in the spring, embracing possibility. The main secret for how to see in the dark: sit with patience, experience the dark. The eyes and the mind adjust. We are very resilient beings. Even a tiny bit of light, if we are patient, allows us to see at least something. Once we sit patiently and let that adjustment happen. Oh, there were moments in July and August when I felt so angry at the world that I could not focus on anything but that anger. And, there is room for anger, even in accepting uncertainty. just not the kind of debilitating anger where you are so angry at something else or someone else that you can't make your own plans and take actions that can shape the outcome. I still get very angry at those who deliberately spread misinformation for their personal, financial, or political gain, and at the way people are willing to prioritize their own freedom instead of seeking solutions that prioritize the freedom and lives of others as well. You know, that kind of me first freedom is really more license than freedom. But if I focus just on my anger about it all, it is unlikely that I will muster the energy to do anything to change the situation. I need to get out of the trap of just blaming. Anger is always rooted in fear. It is part of the fight reaction that is normal for us as human beings. And uncertainty over a long period can get us stuck in anxiety, where fear becomes like a spiraling whirlwind. And we know from neuroscience that our instinctive reactions to fear are basically three: fight, where we get aggressive to those we think are attacking us and creating the situation; or flight, where we run away from the problem; or freeze, where we just want to sink in a hole in the ground, or pull the covers up over our head and stay in bed for the duration. We also know that there are ways to move from those instinctive reactions. The instinctive reactions work temporarily in some situations where there is an immediate attack, but they rarely work long-term, and they do not work in all situations. Almost 25 years ago, when I was recovering from an unexpected divorce, I found some help in dealing with uncertainty from a book written by a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, Pema Chodron. The book, Start Where You Are, and her later book, Comfortable with Uncertainty, were my companions through much of that journey. Over the years, I've adapted some of those teachings to what works for me, including some additional inspiration from Dr. Daniel Siegel, a psychiatrist who draws on what he calls interpersonal neurobiology. So I'm going to tell you about the steps that I try to use when I am stuck in the face of uncertainty. It's very much what I used this summer to move from being angry and confused and wondering if any planning was even worth it, to refocusing on how to do planning in a very different and uncertain world. 6 steps for which I use an acronym, SCOATE. You know, after I selected the letters because they fit the steps, I discovered it's actually a word in one language of the world, Romanian. It means to draw out among other meanings. I'm not sure that totally fits, but in the sense that this can draw us out of the instinctive reactions to uncertainty, fear, and anxiety, fight, flight, and freeze, I think it works. So the S is start where you are. Take a deep breath, realize this is where I am, where we are. We are not in a promised land. We are not in the imagined horrible future that our brains in their anxiety think is likely to take hold. We are where we are. In a lot of advice about how to deal with crises or uncertainty, we're asked to be patient. I even used the word earlier. I believe that we learn to be patient by being able to be in the present moment. This helps to ground our energy that is sparking in us, the energy of impatience, the energy that wants us to immediately react, explode, run away, or hide. Patience doesn't get us to this stage, but is a result of this stage. Start where you are. Sometimes we call the state of being present to ourselves in the moment mindfulness. So mindfulness I define as being present to ourselves in the moment without judgment, but open to awareness. And I'm not talking here about meditation. although meditation can be one form of mindfulness, but a more general concept of being mindful, being able to be present where we are without judgment. Those of you with us last week might remember the story of yes and no. When asked our opinion about something that's happened, and asked about, was that good or bad, to be able to step away from assessing that something is good or bad and just be with it, that's about starting where we are. Another example, we hear and see that it's raining outside. Starting where we are is noticing that it's raining, not just thinking, oh no, wait, we can't have that outdoor picnic I so wanted to attend. Or even, oh good, the plants really need that water. Instead, to be in mindfulness awareness that it's raining, that would include it's raining, and maybe getting in touch with the sound and the vision and what it looks like. And to include in the awareness, I am thinking about the picnic or the plant and the rain's effect on those, because that thought is also in the present moment. Although the picnic and the effect on the plants is in an imagined future. This act of starting where you are also means you give up control. What do I do next? How do I make it stop raining? Well, that's not the present, though the thoughts are. Start where you are. Notice the rain, notice your thoughts as if they were thought bubbles up above your head, not something that defines your identity or are part of you. So the next step is curiosity. Assume an attitude of curiosity about where you are. We've already noticed both the rain and our thoughts, and if we haven't, we can be curious. What is the rain like? How does it sound? And what are we thinking about it? Interesting. Interesting is one of those words, when it's used as a response and it's not deliberately sarcastic, but is genuine, usually means I'm curious about what's going on and trying to withhold judgment. The other thing to make it about curiosity is to make it personal. Not why are those people so awful, but what is the effect on me and why am I afraid of what they're doing? And how might I choose to act given what I'm fearing? Then the O stands for openness. So we're talking here about being open to objective observation. What is real right now? I think here about the story I heard once about the hiker who slipped and broke her leg. She started to panic, and then she decided to use a process much like I'm describing. She put herself in the present moment rather than worrying about all the horrible things that could happen. And then she went to curiosity over judgment. What's going on here? And she became open to objective observation. My leg is broken. I'm alone here. The air temperature is around 50 degrees. I'm about 2 miles from home. And when I got to this stage and thinking about RYSEC emerging plans, it was this. My open to objective observation is I actually have no idea when the pandemic will be at a level where it's safe to gather inside our building again. All the experts can tell me is how risky it is right now. They can't tell me when the pandemic will ease up enough for us to meet because they don't know. I can read from those whose expertise I trust because they've had a lot of training and experience in epidemics and viruses. The Delta variant is more infectious and more deadly than what we were dealing with. Those with vaccinations are far less likely to have severe cases, and there are breakthrough infections. The vaccines never were said to be 100% effective. There are just too many variables for us to have objective knowledge about 6 weeks from now. That is just the objective knowledge of right now. Sometimes even when we respond more strongly to some objective facts than full objectivity justifies, and we need to take another step of openness to objectivity and observation, that can be another part of the process. So let's take a hypothetical case. Let's say we read that out of 100 people who were exposed to the coronavirus, 8 ended up in the hospital, and half of those in the hospital are vaccinated people. Well, our brains want to say that it's just as dangerous to be vaccinated as unvaccinated because of half of them being vaccinated rather. You know, I had to sit down and actually do the math to convince myself what is objective reality behind those numbers. Doing the math, and let's assume 80% of the people were vaccinated. 4 out of 80 unvaccinated is 5% of those people got infected. Badly enough, they were hospitalized. And 4 out of the 20% who were unvaccinated went to the hospital, and that's 20% of them. So even with those numbers sounding like they're equal, the fact is that with an 80% vaccination rate, the unvaccinated were 4 times more likely to be hospitalized than the vaccinated. Now, the actual figure in current studies based on objective observation is it's more like 25 to 30 times as likely to be hospitalized. And it's also a reminder that the vaccinated are not risk-free in either objective observations of experience or in my hypothetical example. So start where you are, muster curiosity, especially over quick judgment, and open yourself to objective observation. The next letter I had was A, which stands for acceptance. Accept what is real. That means we let go of the expectations and habitual reactions and perfectionisms. We also accept our own restlessness, sadness, and anger as human. This is a call to be human, not perfect, is part of that acceptance. Yes, though I want to have objectivity-based, reliable predictions that tell me exactly when we're going to start meeting in our meeting house again, we're not going to have those. Life is inconvenient. We often don't get what we want, and we don't always get what we need. Apologies to the Rolling Stones. And even when things are good, we often don't get applause. From Buddhism, I borrow the idea of the 3 poisons that get in the way of acceptance. The first is aggressively grasping. That is, I have to know when we're going to meet in person, or I can't be a happy person. Or I have to know now that I'm up on this hiking trail with a broken leg, exactly how this is going to turn out. Or in the story from last week, I have to know if my horse ran away, how I feel about that. And then the second poison is rebellion. If I can't be certain, then I'm going to push it away completely. And the third poison is willful ignorance. I'm going to think about other things than this situation. But really, underneath, the anxiety is still there. I note as well that those 3 poisons just happen to be related to fight, flight, and freeze. Long before we could measure impulses in the nerves, people could figure out human behavior by objectively observing. So acceptance doesn't mean we don't do anything, but it does mean we don't react out of grasping for quick fixes or out of rebelling or willful ignorance. We accept that what is in the present. We will get to action. And the 5th stage, I had a T there, is for tenderness. Treat yourself and your own thoughts with tenderness. We feel what we feel, and we all make mistakes. We are human. We can connect to joy and sorrow. We can let acceptance transform into a kind of appreciation. Not of what is. We don't have to appreciate the situation, especially if the situation has pain, but we can appreciate the insights we get as we sit with this. My divorce and what led to it was incredibly painful, and I would not wish that on anyone. I did learn a whole lot about myself, and I make better choices now because of it. I can have some tenderness about that and even appreciation. Sadness and loss, we can accept are a part of having a heart that is capable of being broken open. Wanting a better world for ourselves, for others, for everyone, we are not always going to get that outcome. But each time we see how far we are from it, we can see where we want to go next and appreciate that. And so that final letter in the acronym, embrace possibility, E. Fully present in the moment, it's far easier to see what the future will be and how we might make some contribution towards that. How some actions and attitudes might not be so effective, like being stuck in our anger towards others so that we don't act. This stage is where we have the clarity, maybe even wisdom, on which to base actions. For that woman on the hiking trail, this process got her to a point where she could identify that she had seen a branch nearby, that she could then, in this embracing a possibility, use to get herself to the next road as a crutch. For us, thinking of RYSEC emerging, it's taking the time to get ready and experiment with the possibilities so that when the objective circumstances are such that the risk is lower, we can see each other in person on a Sunday again. And at first with a modified format to reduce the remaining risks. But when we are free from the anxiety about it, we can see more clearly what we need to be doing. Start where you are, muster curiosity over judgment, open up to objective observation, accept what is, have some tenderness toward yourself in the moment, and then embrace the possibilities that you can see with more clarity. Well, now is the time that we say goodbye to those who are watching on video and invite you to participate live some future Sunday. A calendar of our events is at rysec.org.